Lease agreements for real estate in Cyprus, long-term, typically annual. A lease agreement in the real estate sector in Cyprus is a legally binding contract between a property owner, the landlord, and a tenant, where the landlord grants the tenant the right to occupy and use the property for a specified period, typically a year or longer, in exchange for rent. Lease agreements in Cyprus are governed by the Rent Control Law of 1983, Cap. 6, the Contract Law, Cap. 149, and other relevant property laws. Such agreements are particularly important in Cyprus due to the high demand for residential and commercial properties, as well as the rights of tenants and landlords under the law. Long-term leases provide stability for both parties and are common for residential, commercial, and industrial properties. Key features of a lease agreement in Cyprus. 1. Legal framework. Leases in Cyprus are primarily governed by the Rent Control Law, Cap. 6. This law applies to specific properties, such as older residential or commercial properties in controlled areas, and provides significant tenant protection, including rent control and security of tenure. The Contract Law, Cap. 149, governs the terms, obligations, and enforceability of lease agreements that are not subject to the Rent Control Law. Immovable Property, Tenure, Registration, and Valuation, Law, Cap. 224, addresses ownership and title issues related to real estate. 2. Essential components of a lease agreement. A valid lease agreement typically includes the following. Parties involved: the landlord, property owner, and the tenant, person or entity leasing the property. Description of the property. Full details of the property being leased, e.g., address, type of property, size, and specific use. Term of the lease. The duration of the lease, e.g., 1 year, 3 years, or longer. Whether it is a renewable lease and the terms of renewal. Rent and payment terms. The agreed rent amount, payment method, and frequency, monthly, quarterly, etc. Security deposit, usually 1 or 2 months' rent, and how it will be handled. Purpose of the lease. Whether the property is leased for residential, commercial, or industrial use. Restrictions, if any, e.g., subleasing, modifications. Obligations of the landlord. Maintaining the property in good condition. Ensuring the tenant's peaceful enjoyment of the property. Obligations of the tenant. Timely payment of rent. Using the property only for the agreed upon purpose. Maintaining and returning the property in the same condition, excluding normal wear and tear. Termination clause. Conditions under which the lease can be terminated by either party. Notice period required for termination, typically 1 to 3 months. Dispute resolution. How disputes between the landlord and tenant will be resolved, e.g., mediation, arbitration, or court. Governing law. A statement that the lease is governed by the laws of Cyprus. 3. Tenant and landlord rights under Cyprus law. Tenant rights. Security of tenure. Under the Rent Control Law, tenants in controlled areas cannot be evicted except for specific reasons, e.g., non-payment of rent or breach of contract. Rent control. In controlled areas, landlords cannot arbitrarily increase the rent. Rent increases must comply with legal limits set by the Rent Control Tribunal. Peaceful enjoyment. The tenant has the right to use the property without interference from the landlord. Landlord rights. Rent collection. The landlord has the right to receive rent as per the agreement. Eviction. The landlord can evict the tenant for non-payment of rent, illegal use of the property, or breach of contract terms, subject to proper legal procedures. Property maintenance. The landlord can require the tenant to repair damages caused by negligence or misuse. 4. Long-term lease considerations. Registration. If the lease term exceeds 15 years, it must be registered with the Department of Lands and Surveys. Renewal clauses. Many long-term leases include automatic renewal clauses that specify how the lease can be extended and under what conditions. Termination and penalties. Early termination of a long-term lease by either party may result in penalties or forfeiture of the security deposit. 5. Key protections under Cyprus law. Controlled areas, properties in areas designated as controlled, typically urban or older properties, fall under the rent control law, ensuring tenant protection from arbitrary eviction or rent increases. Uncontrolled areas, in newer properties or non-controlled areas, the terms of the lease agreement are binding, and parties are free to negotiate the terms without restrictions. Example of long-term lease agreement terms. Scenario: a tenant leases an apartment in Nicosia for 2 years under a renewable contract. Rent: Euro 800/month, payable on the first of every month. Security deposit: €1,600, 2 months rent. Renewal clause: the lease automatically renews for another year unless either party provides 2 months' notice before the end of the term. Termination: early termination by the tenant requires forfeiture of the security deposit. Landlord's obligations: maintain major structural repairs. Tenant's obligations: keep the property clean and pay utility bills. To conclude, a long-term lease agreement in the real estate industry in Cyprus provides legal clarity and protection for both landlords and tenants. By clearly defining the terms, rights, and obligations, the agreement ensures a smooth relationship and minimizes disputes. Both parties must draft the lease carefully, register it when necessary, and seek legal advice to comply with Cyprus law, whether for residential or commercial purposes.